AI and education. We're going to start with our moderator, Dr. Walter Greenleaf from Stanford. Dr. Greenleaf is a neuroscientist and medical technology developer at Stanford University. He's got over 35 years of medical research and product development experience. Walter is a leading authority in digital medicine and clinical virtual reality technology. He has expertise in a wide range of clinical sectors. He has developed systems that address a spectrum of conditions, including post-traumatic stress and anxiety disorders, stroke, addictions, autism, depression, and other challenging problems in behavioral and physical medicine. In addition to his research at Stanford, Walter is the technology and neuroscience advisor to several early-stage medical product companies and investment groups. We also have Dr. Simon Shim. He's a distinguished professor in computer engineering department at San Jose State University, where he plays a significant role in both research and teaching. He has an extensive background and has previously served on the editorial board of IEE, and he's also was the area director for a significant amount of time for internet computing. His professional journey includes experience as a director at SAP Labs in Palo Alto, California, where he contributed to pioneering work in in-memory databases. Additionally, Professor Shim has served as a guest editor for the IEE Computer, curating special issues on topics such as high-speed security, the CAP theorem's growing impact, and the next generation memory. Throughout his academic career, SU Professor Shim has made significant contributions to the field, authoring over 50 research papers. Peter Norvig is a fellow at Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute and a researcher at Google Inc. Previously, he directed Google's Core Search Algorithms Group. He is the co-author of Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach, the leading textbook in the field, and co-teacher of Artificial Intelligence class that signed up 160,000 students, helping to kick off the current round of massive open online classes. And Sadid Hasan has over 2 decades of AI research and product development experience, currently leads development of generative AI capabilities and solutions for Office M365 Copilots and Azure AIOps products as part of Microsoft AI Development Acceleration Program at the New England Research and Development Center. Previously, he was the executive director of AI at CVS Health and technical lead of the AI group at Philips Research, focusing on solving various clinical natural language processing and computer vision problems using deep learning to develop advanced clinical decision support and healthcare AI products. He has a PhD in NLP and machine learning with hundreds of peer-reviewed publications and patents on topics including neural paraphrase generation, question generation, complex question answering, multi-document summarization, clinical diagnosis, inference, and more. He was recently recognized as one of the 100 most influential AI leaders in the United States. This is our panel. Welcome.
Well, thank you for kicking off the panel, and I think we do have some deep expertise here. So I'm going to start the engagement by asking each of the panelists to tell us what they're passionate about. And hopefully that'll also line up with what you're currently working on. It may not, but I'd love to hear what, given the robust changes we're seeing in AI right now, what is exciting you? And go into a little detail with specific examples, if you would.
Okay, it is an exciting time. 40 years ago, Benjamin Bloom said that one-on-one personalized tutoring is better than impersonalized lecturing, and we know that to be true. But these large language models we've seen in the last couple of years is the first technology that really allowed us to think about doing that in a cost-effective way. Right? So at Google with the Learn LM project, our motto is a tutor for every student and a teaching assistant for every teacher. And maybe now we can actually do that. So some of the things that I think are really exciting is one, this new ability to generate podcasts. I guess in general, the idea to be able to have language models with very large context windows, to be able to put in 1 million words of context and have it generate something reasonable out of that. But this new capability to generate a podcast and then to edit it, I think that's really interesting because it's cross-language, and we haven't had that before. And then the other thing I'm super excited about is the possibility of doing simulations of students or of teachers. And I think that's really necessary to make progress. So I worked a little on self-driving cars, and in order to make that work, you got to build a car and you got to drive it on the streets. And the first 1,000,000 miles are always the hardest. But after you drive that 1,000,000 miles, you can build a pretty good simulation of driving. And then you start driving billions of miles in simulation, and then you start getting good. In education, we've never had that. We've never had a simulation of a student that was worth anything. So we could get feedback, we can do this reinforcement learning thing, and I can get a student to be 20% better at answering the next question by experimenting and figuring out what works best. But if I want to say, I want this student to be happy and productive 2 years from now, I got to gather 2 years worth of data. And I can't do that. But maybe we can do it in simulation soon. So that's another exciting thing to me.
Indeed exciting. And Simon, how about, what are you excited about and working on?
So I'm also excited about using AI built by Google. So for example, I'm actually using Notebook LM, which actually I think he was talking about podcast. So this is how I use it. Anybody using Notebook ML? Oh, okay. Good. So this software can actually help me actually make it more efficient researcher. So if I upload a paper, and then I can type, summarize this paper for me with 10 points. And then it'll summarize what are the 10 major points of the paper. And I can also ask, what are the pros and cons of this paper? And then it will summarize what are the pros and cons. And then I could ask, what is the next research I have to do? And then it'll give you the bullet points of what are the next research that I need to do. So this actually saved a lot of my time. Because in old-fashioned way, I have to read all the papers. And I think through overnight, what are the pros and cons? But the Notebook LM will give me all these efficiency in terms of my research. And I'm very excited about this new tools of AI tools that we can use in education. And my point of the AI in education is the AI should help students, help faculty. But if they give me answers, I think it actually hurts. So I'll give you an example that we're actually doing a class and then doing an exam, and then a group of students give the same wrong answers. But we emphasize this particular topic on SVM, and then emphasize about 5 times. Say, this is important, this is important. But again, there are a group of students who give wrong answers, and I type that question in major LLM, they give the wrong answers. So they actually can lead to wrong answers. So it's not actually helping them, it's actually hurting their understanding. So I think this depends on what kind of tools that this large corporation is building will help us to learn faster, more efficient. Sometimes the student will just take an answers and submit, and then they actually get hurt because they actually lose a chance to learn.
Well, and as Peter had pointed out earlier when we were discussing, things are just getting started. So hopefully some aspects of that can be screened for or prevented. But could you tell us, you're looming over us right now, which is wonderful. We'd love to hear from on high what you're excited about and what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think, Peter and Simon covered it very well. Yeah, so we are working on all those, copilots that I'm leading right now in terms of Office and 365 copilots, right? So how to put it? So in terms of the tools that we are building, many of these AI tools that are not new, right? So obviously, if you have used the search tools like Bing and Google search, they used to give you prediction of the next words or phrases, over time. Now that we have, after ChatGPT, we have now, excel at conversational AI. So that is basically giving you more power in terms of understanding, the sentences and long context, as Peter brought out. So these tools are not new. So similarly, Microsoft tools that we had like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all these tools have been empowering students, teachers over the years, right? So we are building these copilots now to even maximize their usage, right? So how they can, get more with less effort within those tools. So for example, people used to use Word to, write their documents. Now they can use it to summarize quickly, to understand, make sense of the large documents very quickly. So similarly for PowerPoint, people used to, come up with the slides, and that took long time to prepare a slide deck. And so now we are empowering them that how can that be done quickly so that they can focus on critical thinking, right? So that's the idea of empowering everyone in the planet. And in terms of not building everything from scratch, rather how to, integrate these generative AI capabilities within our existing tools that can empower students and teachers. So for example, we released Forms Copilot a few months back, which is like you can use Microsoft Forms now, so you can build quizzes, assessments, and tests, easily just by writing some prompts. That used to take months for teachers to come up with a holistic idea, right? So yeah, so that's what I'm passionate about.
So what I'm hearing as a common theme is that AI in education is reducing some of the friction and burden, both for the students and for the learners and the educators to come up with content and pedagogy. In a moment, I'm going to ask what the concerns are, but Peter, I'd love to have you expand on the point that I love that you made earlier, which is we're just getting started. You've been working in this area for a while. What is your helicopter vision of where we are and where things might be very soon?
Yeah, so we built these large language models, and they're just super surprisingly good at giving mostly correct answers to questions. And that's amazing to me. I started in natural language processing in the 80s, and I thought at some time I'll have a conversation with a computer, but I didn't think it would happen just by feeding it a bunch of text and then having it do so well, but it does. But what it doesn't know how to do is pedagogy. It's an expert in subject matter, but it's not an expert in teaching. And what we have so far in things like Conmigo that try to do that try to, if the student says, well, just tell me the answer, says, no, I'm not going to tell you the answer. I'm going to help you get to the answer. And the way we've done that so far is with prompt engineering, that we say in the prompt, don't give away the answer and so on and all these other things. What I would like to see is use more of the inference time computation to take on that load, as we see in like the 04 model, where it's not just what's the next most probable word, I'll spit out that word and then I'll think about the next word. Rather, it's I'll do a lot of compute up front, I'll try lots of different things, I'll consider which ones work, I'll criticize them, I'll compare them to each other, and only when I've done that, then I'll give the answer. That's how you get good at solving complex math problems like the Math Olympiad, and I think that's how we should get good at teaching, right? So if I'm a teacher and the student asks a question, saying, I don't get this, one thing I could do is, okay, I'll explain it to you. Another thing I could do is say, well, what do you think? Try again. Another thing I could do is say, oh yeah, that's a really hard problem. Here's a simpler problem. Why don't you try to do this one first? I think this one's at the right level for you. And so, there's a dozen different moves I could make, and I don't think we can choose the right one just with prompt engineering. I think we have to do runtime computation to figure that out.
Fantastic. And I guess I'd like to expand that question to the rest of the panel because it's giving us a vision for where we might be in the short term. Simon, what's your sense?
So in terms of the state of art, I have some friend in medical and chemistry and biology field, and they were excited about this AlphaFold. They said it's a game changer, and it'll help them to reduce their lot of experimentation times. And I actually look at that, and they said it's like a two-stage neural networks, and then input is basically the protein sequence, plus their coordination, plus two-pair interactions. So those are the actual input, and then they use a transformer to train it. And using this architecture, they can actually predict the protein structure, which is a very important matter. And then recently in medical and bio, they actually start accepting papers based on AlphaFold result. So they don't have to do the actual experimentation. So because paper, they do the AlphaFold experimentation, they actually accept the paper. That actually help them to be more productive research, scientists. So I think AI role in education should really help them to reduce their, the time. And I think the technology is there, but I'm really against giving answers to the students. Here is an answer, sometimes a wrong answer. I think that's really kind of detrimental.
Well, and with the prompt engineering pathway that Peter described, I think there's ways to address that issue. Without revealing some of the things on the near-term horizon from Microsoft that might be proprietary, I'd love, Sadid, to hear what you see in the near term that will change, that will be the nenext lurch forward.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. Yeah, obviously, we're working on some of the things that I can disclose right now, but yeah, definitely, as others mentioned, if you think about the trend with the recent, O1 models, GPT-4 O1 models, these are very powerful in terms of, conversation skills, right? So it's very natural way of responding, right? So that means that we achieve a great deal of conversation, but in terms of understanding what we are actually, what the user is thinking, right? What actually they need. So that's the personalization type of education. So that is the key challenge, right? Because the large language models can be actually, directed into wrong direction, and it can also direct the user in a wrong direction based on how the conversation is going. And this all, rooted down to tokenization, right? Because the tokenization is used in a way that, these are all predicting next tokens, and if one token is predicted in a wrong direction, and there is also on top of these guardrails to prevent any harmful words and sentences. So it's not just the model, right? So that's what people needs to understand, is that the product of this intelligent tutoring system and these copilots, they're not exactly the large language models. Rather, it has all traditional machine learning, intent detection, and responsible AI best practices guardrails on top of it to prevent all those hallucination and wrong tokenization generation, so that the conversation is guided as well as protected. So that is the holy grail of AI, that how to make it more consistent and going towards reasoning and planning while understanding what the user is actually looking for. So that could be achieved through prompt engineering and more advanced unlimited context size, in context learning and things like that. And with Copilot agents, so that's was released recently, how to simulate all that environment with agents talking to themselves and learning themselves how to teach each other. That could benefit the students and the teachers.
I love the image agents talking to each other, and I love your reference to personalizing the educational process by understanding the learner. And I do think that's implicit in many of the things that are being developed, is that not just coming up with new ways to approach the structured learning, but also how to adjust it for the individual's learning style, individual's comprehension speed. Well, the next phase of our panel is going to be asking some of the concerns, the constraints, the challenges all C's. But before we go there, I'm going to take a few panels questions from the audience. Here's a good one. Any ideas for inspiring students? As we know, engagement is really important, and it can be hard when you have other things you could be doing instead of learning, especially if it's not matched to what you're in the mood for learning at the time. How do we leverage the new AI technologies to help address the idea of reaching the student and inspiring them?
I think two things. One is I don't want to replace the teacher. As I said, I want to augment the teacher. And maybe more of the teacher's role now becomes that part of inspiring. The teacher has less of the route presentation to do and can make more of the personal connection with the student, and usually a person will be better at making a personal connection than a machine can. The other thing is, you mentioned the personalization. You want something that excites the students, and they get bored just doing things that aren't interesting to them. But if you say, well, what is interesting to you? What project would you love to do? And now we'll do that together. I think that helps bring a lot of motivation.
Well, and if we can adjust it to the student's level, I'm sure that many of the people in this audience have had the experience of being in a classroom and feeling like you already know the material, you're ahead of everyone else, so you're bored. But if we can dynamically adjust and personalize and give the teacher the tools to understand the audience, the students too, then it can be maybe more engaging. Yeah.
So John Seely Brown had this great example where he said, you ask a student, what are you interested in? And they say basketball. And you say, okay, if I make 27 out of 44 free throws, what percentage is that? And the student isn't tricked. He says, that's not a basketball question, that's a division question, all right? It's not more interesting because you call them free throws rather than apples or whatever. But if instead you say to the student, okay, why don't you do a project to get better at shooting free throws? And JSB says, we can't do that because the answer might not fall in the right curriculum, right? One student might say, oh, I'm going to figure out the angle and do physics. And another student might say, I'm going to look at the muscles in the arm and do physiology. And so you can't put that into curriculum because you have no idea where it's going to go. But if we have personalized instruction, then that shouldn't be a problem.
Well, and it's more functional too. Not only is it more engaging, but it's addressing something that is more than just learning arithmetic, it's learning how to apply things. That's fantastic. Simon, what are your thoughts about inspiring students?
So, there are actually many of these AI features students already know more than faculty. For example, nowadays this LLM model become omni or multi-models. So what they can do is that they can actually take a picture and ask about what is the logic of this particular question. And then only thing is that you just take a picture and ask question, and it answers all these questions that why this is what it is. So I think in terms of that, it's really personalized learning and without minimum effort, just taking pictures, right? So in terms of motivating the student is that this AI is really improving in unprecedented pace, and they want to catch up with all these technologies. Even I'm using, notebook, LM kind of every day to actually make me better teacher. And then I think students are also doing that because whenever they stuck, instead of going to, TAs, they can actually go to LLM to actually ask all these questions. So that's actually the ultimate personalized learning.
Well, and I think we need to remember that this technology will also help people with expertise transduce their expertise into something that matches different levels of learning and also is appropriate for the task at hand. Right now, matching knowledge, information to the task at hand is often extremely difficult, but we'll have tools to help experts bring their information forward appropriately. So, how about you? What do you see as your technology and how it will help inspire students?
Yeah, so I see it as connected with AI literacy, education, adoption, trust building, and going into the root. So I recently joined the scientific committee of International AI Olympiad that started this year. So really going to the students and taking these tools and getting them familiar with what these tools can do and can't do. So setting the expectation from the beginning would really help in terms of showing them the powerful the applications and tools that are being developed right now, so they can actually play with it, right? So and students, they love to play, so gamification of these tools really would inspire them. At the same time, how to show them that how to engage with these tools, right? Because the way we are building this is all using natural languages, right? So we have we are building multimodal capabilities, both text, vision, speech are incorporated, as well as doing it in multilingual, all different languages we are trying to push so that they can ask and interact with these tools in their own language, and they can define the role in a way that I need to understand in that level, that reading level, as a 7-year-old and things like that. So they can actually define those prompts. So we're also showing them those examples of what can be, talked with, what are the prompts like that you can use, so you can best guide these copilots to get the best answers that you need.
Fantastic. I think one of the challenges of this panel is we're asking 3 experts to take a whole industry that is being revolutionized by a whole other industry and talk in just a short amount of time about a few parts of it. So thank you for your patience of trying to be succinct and to address a really big challenge of how is AI impacting and will be impacting education. But we should talk about the concerns too. There are ethical concerns, but there's also practical concerns too. And a few of the questions that have come in have been about things such as how do we address cheating, how do we address our actually used for education, not for replacing learning as a substitute for actually learning something, you're leveraging technology. Those are complex questions, but I'd love to have you take a stab at addressing them. What are your concerns? I'll start with a little bit of my concern, which is as we personalize the process, we're also at risk of labeling people. I think people, students in particular, as they are growing up, youngsters change in their learning styles. And what may be, if we're not careful at coming up with ways of understanding an individual's learning style and putting them into different buckets, we may be reinforcing the stigma that goes with certain learning styles. So that's a concern I have. Maybe it's already been addressed in the community, but just to key off the concern discussion, I'll throw that one out there. Peter, what concerns do you see?
So my first concern is we don't know how to do this, so it's all experimental, and we'll probably make mistakes, and then we got to get it right. Another concern is equity of equal access, and are we going to make the rich richer and the poor poorer? So we got to get that right. You mentioned the cheating thing. That's not a big concern for me. I guess it's a concern if you're a teacher and you say, I don't want to change anything I do, right? And so the first place it came up is, I think as teachers, we had this shortcut that says an easy thing to do is to assign an essay, because anybody could do it. In the old days, you needed a pencil and paper. Now you need a word processor. And if you could generate a coherent, rational argument, then you probably understood what was going on. We now realize that that assumption is false, that you can generate a coherent response without really understanding what's going on. So that means that the essay, just like that, is not a good assignment anymore. So you need something more complicated. You need to say, well, you've got to criticize the essay, or here's what ChatGPT does, you've got to do better than that, or some other variation. And there's lots of possible things you could do. we're opening up new possibilities, right? So we assigned the essay because it was easy to create. Now you could say, do anything you want. You know, maybe make a piece of music, maybe make a movie. And it used to be making a movie was a semester-long project. Now it can be a 2-day project with these tools. So maybe it's the supremacy of the essay will go away. And then I think the other thing is I would really like to get away from, like you said, labeling students by saying this is the A student, this is the B student, and this is the C student, right? Because that's really, it's not for the student's benefit to do that. Rather, I'd like to say, let's help the student along, and their evaluation of who they are should be their portfolio of what they've done, right? And in other fields where it really matters, that's what we do, right? If I want to hire a piano player to play a concert for me, I don't say, show me your GPA in music school. I don't care about that. I want to say, you know, give me a recording of something you did, that's good. And so let's let students build a portfolio, and all these tests that now are such high profile and nerve-inducing, let's have them just be private for the sake of the student to guide their own learning. We don't have to record or show them. And so now cheating goes away because the grades never get shown to anybody.
I love that. Simon, what are your thoughts?
In terms of cheating, I think I agree with Peter that it's less of concern because it's an in-person class. They cannot use phone to cheat. So I think cheating is more about essay is an issue, but essay in our system, Canvas, actually can detect whether it's machine generated versus human writing. So there are very good software can detect that, you know, this is actually the student actually writing the essays versus generated essays. So I think this is less of concern. But the more concern that I have is, you know, these large companies that building educational software, educational AI, they need to understand that they need to train another neural network is in the student brain. They have neural networks. They should understand how to train this neural network, not just machine neural networks. And if you can understand how to train student learning by training neural networks of their brain, I think they can build much better AI for education. Because they seem to be just focusing on giving answers and then giving well-made essays. Rather, they should focusing on how to make the student learn, how to force them to learn, how to guide them to learn. Like it could be a personalized learning, but again, they need to understand, they need to write an AI to make student learning.
I love that, especially the neuroscience part, because it's what I love. But Sadid, in a way, when I'm asking someone who is part of a tech company developing products that support learning, when I ask, what are your concerns and what are the constraints, I'm also asking, what are your headaches? What are you most worried and frustrated about, and how are you getting over them?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, the number one priority that we have is the security priority. So that's I would say that's one of the things that we always prioritize, because, you know, all these models are very powerful, and how can we make sure that they're not in wrong hands? And in education environment, you know, you have stakeholders there. Obviously, you know, that we have to be very careful because it's all sensitive data and you know, sensitive use of it. So how do we make sure that we build tools that are, you know, not prone to prompt injection attacks and you know, those different type of ways that the models can be directed in wrong direction? So that's one. And the other part, as also brought in by other panelists, is in terms of critical thinking, right? So how do we ensure that the answers are not given? So obviously, you know, some of the demos that we have shown, you know, we have partnerships going on with Khan Academy. So you'll see that there are ways you can actually guide those conversations in a way that the answers are not given directly, so that the students are actually challenged with different scenarios based on their level of expertise, so they can actually guide them into the right answer by themselves while providing small clues or hints like that. So there are ways that we can use agent-based frameworks to guide those conversations. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can I just jump in? I got to say, I agree with that, and I think Khan Academy has done a great job on a lot of things. But I talked to a parent who said, my kid's in a classroom where they use Khan in the classroom for math, and he says, my kid became an expert in how to game the system to tell him that he passed. And the parent said, it would have been easier to learn the math than to learn how to game it like that, and more useful. But,
Well, to your point earlier, though, Peter, that I think this will allow us to maybe get away from the structure of grades. And I think then there's no point in gaming if it's designed to help you refine the skills that you need to work on and why. I do have a specific question from the audience, which is related to this issue, which is, how do current data privacy laws under 18 not allowed for many AI services influence research around AI in education, particularly K-12? Are those constraints that you're running across?
So I'm also concerned about my own privacy also, because these big companies are releasing, say, personal agent. So the personal agent today, personal agent can read all your emails, can understand what you are doing in your email, plus they can look at all your schedule, they can listen your conversation with the meetings. So
what groceries you're buying, what books you're reading, and so
reading,
much.
and then what am I doing, and where am I going?
How many steps you're taking.
So if these data is not protected, I think I'll be very concerned. And actually, one of my friends is always turn off his phone because he doesn't get the call, because he's concerned about his privacy, that the phone knows where he are, where he goes. He always turn off his phone. Maybe at some point I need to turn off my phone so that they don't get my privacy.
Well, in some places, I think where cameras are ubiquitous, we might need to wear camouflage. I do, but to get to the, I agree, by the way, absolutely. And I love the fact that we're going to have new tools in my field of medicine to do better objective measurements that are useful for helping people with mental health issues, just as an example. But the privacy issues become more and more. The more we understand individual to improve education, for example, the more we also understand how to sell them things. Or if we're in a zone where dissidents are not appreciated, that may be a problem too. But the questions also did say, are the data privacy laws getting in the way of developing AI in education? So what I've heard you say, Simon, is that it's good that we have these privacy laws. Are they adequate enough to allow us to still move forward, though? Are they getting in your way of developing educational systems? And maybe, Sadid, you can ask that from the Microsoft perspective.
Microsoft.
I don't, obviously, it's super important, and we need ground truth data, right? So in terms of evaluating, how these models are performing, but these are not actually preventing us to build, large systems, because like we have options or ways to come up with or generate lots of synthetic data. So we have those, synthetic data generation, that is capabilities that you don't need vast amount of, real data to progress, development of these large language models.
Fantastic. Actually, I'm just going to throw it open. What have you not said that you'd like to say to this group?
So I guess another thing I'm interested in is tools for content creators. I think a lot of the focus so far has been the internet is out there, it knows a lot of things. How can a student ask a question and be helped? But one of the things you asked was in terms of motivation, and I think that one thing that's motivating is to have more of a personal connection with the teacher rather than to have a connection with everybody on the internet. And so you get that when a teacher delivers a course, you get that when a textbook writer delivers a textbook, you have the subject matter presented in a personal way. And so I would like to see more tools for content creators to say, I have a word processor to create a book or a chapter or whatever, but I don't have any good tools to say, I want to create an online learning experience. I think that should be...
Well, and now we can do A/B testing, and we can get feedback to the creators about their design choices.
Right. But, when I open up my Office suite, whether it's from Microsoft or Google, it gives me a word processor and a spreadsheet and slides. It doesn't give me create my learning experience. And I think there's a lot more people in any company that says, I got to teach some of my employees how to do this job. And we haven't delivered that for them. So I hope that will be one topic for the future.
I bet there's some experts in the audience who will come up to you afterwards saying, I'm working on that.
Okay, so pitch me your company if you're doing that.
Simon, what are you thinking there?
So one last point that I want to make is we should not make AI so good can replace human. So, for example, we are using Copilot. The Copilot made a lot of mistakes, and then even though we prompt, it requires a human supervision. So even though it create the core code in, let's say, 2 seconds, and then there are still a lot of holes, and we actually the human has to make it adaptable to the existing code. But what if, in 2 years later, that the Copilot becomes so good, you don't need anybody to modify the code. And then you can just embed a code and work. And if that replace, say, programmers, I think we have a lot of issue with the society as well as university. For example, we have this translator came, right? So a lot of people who wanted to major, let's say, Spanish or German, they don't see a need after the graduation. Maybe my job is taken by the translator. And then they can do real-time translation nowadays. So I think the technology actually forced people to not to take these particular majors. And then it may happen in software, it may happen data science, it may happen some other field.
And I suppose it's implicit that people are concerned about AI, quote, taking away our jobs. But education is designed to prepare people for the jobs of the future. So in a way, there needs to be a jujitsu approach to this of looking a few chess moves down and saying what will change because of the impact of this surge in amazing technology on our work environment and our recreational environment and our educational environment, and how do we skill up people with that in mind? And I think that'll be an interesting challenge. Is that something that you're working on at Microsoft?
This is holistic, right? So the way I see it is, AI is not going to replace people, right? So it's always going to be augmented, and that's why we're calling it Copilot. So, and our CTO says this, like, we are trying to make sure that all of us are empowered, right? So think about it. When I was at school, I had, biology, chemistry, mathematics. Each teacher, they were having their own domain knowledge, and I had to go and ask them questions differently. Now, all these powerful models are so expert in all domains that you have personalized, AI assistants almost as knowledgeable, in terms of like at least acquiring the knowledge that we have since humanity started, all those encoded into their, memory. So this kind of real-time personal assistant that could actually help us learn and grow, but that doesn't mean that it knows everything, right? So it has to understand the intent. So that's why, we already solved almost the conversational challenges, but then reasoning, planning, imagination, organization, all those future steps are still in progress in terms of what we call as intelligence. So therefore, our CTO calls is that we are trying to make the impossible problems as hard problems, but we are not saying that everything can be solvable at 100% accuracy. So if you see all those benchmarks data sets that are being tested when a new large language model comes in, they try to show its performance has been increased, but they don't show that's 100% perfect, and sometimes those test sets are also kind of based on the leakage of information because the models are trained on them. So that's very hard to understand or prove that these models could be 100% capable. So my takeaway from this is that humans are actually learning. All of us, our next generations are always learning new things and new tools, and they're getting smarter day by day. And all this would empower all of us so that we can, solve those drudgery of work and focus on the most complex problems that needs, human problem solving and collaboration, like climate change, healthcare. So all those areas that you can actually focus where AI still has a long way to go.
So in terms of are we going to have job loss, I think we get to decide, right? So the way the economists look at it, you have substitutable goods, Coke and Pepsi, where if one gets better, the demand for the other gets worse. And if AI is like that, a substitute for us, then we're in trouble. But we also have complementary goods, like razors and razor blades, where if one gets better, then the demand for the other gets better. So we should be building complementary AI systems that work with people, and then we'll get a better result.
And I think education is a fertile ground for that. And there were several questions sent by the audience about creativity. And I think, to your point, Peter, that if we design to facilitate creativity and leave room for it and not restrict it, it's really a design issue. And it's going to be interesting to see how things surge forward with these new tools. I'm gathering from all three of you that you're optimistic. Is that correct?
I am, but I want to be cautious.
Cautiously optimistic.
So we're, 2 or 3 years into this large language model universe. If we think about if the Wright brothers were in 1903, where was the aviation industry in 1906, right? It wasn't as good or as safe as it was today. And we had a lot of crashes before we get to the reliable systems we have now. So I hope we can do a better job of making it through that transition period to the safe and effective period.
Oh, fantastic. Well, audience, I think you've heard about the optimism, you've heard about the constraints and the concerns, and you have also heard about where things could go and the pathways and challenges there. I guess one final thought, I think we have time for that. Do you feel that, were you surprised? I guess is my final question. Things seem to have surged forward almost overnight with the burst of what we can do with AI into the scene. Were you surprised about its impact on education, or did you see it coming?
So I'm really surprised, and also I'm very cautious, optimistic. But whenever I read the article says OpenAI Orion is coming December next year, I don't know what they have in Orion. They said that it's a human level. And then the AGI is coming for sure within 2 years.
Define AGI for the audience in case they're not familiar.
Artificial General Intelligence is AGI. So when the AGI is coming, we know that it's coming because they build bigger and bigger model, they improve, they are scaling bigger models, they invest more money, buy more GPUs, and then at some point within 2 years, again, this is very optimistic. Article says within 2 years we'll have AGI coming. So when AGI is coming, are we ready as a university, as an education? What we are going to do when AGI is coming?
Were you surprised?
The effect or the effectiveness of LLMs based solely on scaling laws was surprising to me. I thought we'd need continual updating of algorithms that would be slower. But given that we had that success, the effect on education seems straightforward.
So, I'll give you the final word. Were you surprised with how fast things have moved forward?
We all were taken into surprise, but we are little less because obviously we're working on it for a while. So I would say, the way that we want to move forward is, these models, they're learning from web data, right? So that's where, to Simon's point, right? So I don't believe in AGI because I don't think that's, we need to define it very carefully. Because
I'll take your word for it.
So these models, learn from web data that includes all things possible, right? So those are signals, noises, right? So we all humans are collaborating in the internet, and they're taking and learning from them. So our strengths and limitations are also learned by these models, right? So that's why we have hard time to, prevent hallucination and putting responsible AI guardrails on top of it. So good data is a requirement to get to, better systems. But then how do you evaluate good data, right? Who is the judge, right? So that's the subjective part. So therefore, even though it has good general knowledge, it's not gonna be that AGI level, that it cannot be Oracle. It cannot know everything because we don't know everything, right? So that's the perspective that I have. So therefore, it would achieve significant performance improvement, but never be something like that where we say that everything is perfect.
Fantastic. Well, afraid we're out of time, but thank you very much, gentlemen. It was wonderful.